You will be cancelled faster than a show on Netflix. Cold opener for this one seemed to feature a slower, less rainy version of the show's usual ending sequence, hinting that there were some Psycho Rangers for the Ojamajo underneath these umbrellas. Well, y'all certainly can't be worse than these cheap knockoffs. The show proper would immediately clarify their deal, with Oyashi requesting some more assistance for his mission to capture Hana, resulting in Gigi granting him 3 more boys. This is heard by Majorin, as these idiots never thought to just fix their damn windows. Meanwhile, Aiko was playing her harmonica for Hana, which she quickly took interest in. From there, she made the biggest mistake possible and had it within arm's length of the toddler. Welcome to my world, Aiko. Understandably, not wanting to need to deep clean her instrument, Aiko tried to persuade her to give it back, but then just resorted to straight up taking it, which again, from personal experience, is just a bad idea. Fortunately, Mrs. Harukaze was there to show off her pro skills. This ended up having some varying effects on the girls, as while Hana was happy to be spoiled, Aiko was reminded that she couldn't do any of this with her mother anymore. Yeah, this really should have been more of an Aiko episode, with her again dealing with her parents' divorce, and yet, spoilers, it's mostly regulated to just this scene. I mean, it's still pretty good and effective, as while clearly still missing her own mother, Aiko very maturely didn't shed any tears, allowing her to have a good discussion with Mrs. Harukaze about how a parent influences their child. Good stuff, even though I have recently heard that lesson on an episode of Hiragara Sky, but that's really more on me and Toei's obsession with the god babies. Anyway, as it turned out, the main reason Hana wanted the harmonica had less to do with some poetic influence Aiko had had on her, and more because she was teething, which just makes me hope that thing isn't made of metal. Babies really should chew more on plastic toys, specifically designed for teething, but whatever. At the same time, Akatsuki was introducing Oyashi to his teammates, Leon, Fujio, and Toru.
Alexander T 親父でになるけどね。
ミドルネームの T って何?
It's T Twister, isn't it? The old wizard wasn't too impressed by them, which really he had no place to talk, especially after they literally mowed him down.
甘いよ、親父。
Yayoi did better. Also, I'm getting the distinct feeling that these lines were totally ad-libbed. Anyway, the boys made their way to the human world.
人間界って賑やかなんだね。
You only say that because you've been on Mercury for too long. Interestingly though, the little warlocks had apparently never seen a member of the opposite sex, which just makes me wonder how much of a sausage fest is the wizard world. As a result, they unwisely complimented Reika and were forced to make a tactical retreat on account of cooties. They ended up at their target's location, the Mahodo. The Ojamajo had closed shop early for the day after learning from Della that Hana's next test would likely involve walking, while the toddler, who was still struggling to even stand up, being a bit of a late bloomer in terms of her physical abilities, though her magical abilities were, of course, game-breaking. Well, if it works for Joe Swanson, I don't see why not. Akatsuki and his boys soon arrived, and tried to make a good first impression by doing a male cheerleader routine.
なんやねんこの人ら。SOS トリオの方がまだいいわ。
That is very much up for debate, Hazuki. Granted, trying to pull off a poor man's Sentai routine is cringy in its own right, but at least they are not unlikable just yet. If anything, the worst character in this scene was actually Doremi, who was letting her boy craziness go out of control. I mean, yeah, it is her thing, but I'm not a big fan of it when it results in her neglecting her god baby and never really apologizing for it. Anyway, Aiko managed to chase off the boys, who later hinted at who their counterparts were going to be because, again, Psycho Rangers in these prepubescent boys. And this would be the last we'd see of them for the remainder of this episode. Yeah, can you kind of guess what one of my biggest complaints about this episode is going to be? Anyway, Hana's walkie training continued with a little magical support as, again, they tried to use food as bait. Doremi, did you leave your brain at home? Eventually, the solution of course turned out to be Aiko's harmonica, which at least did tie back to the most interesting plot line of this episode that really should have gotten a lot more focus, but again, let's save talking about that for at the end. With that, they took a picture for Insta and made their way to the next exam that night. And as it turned out, Della had kind of exaggerated the itinerary as the toddlers were given training walkers. It actually makes a lot of sense as kids do develop at their own paces, but wow, way to make the previous scene feel rather superfluous, especially considering what's about to come up. Because when it seemed like Hana was going to fail her exam due to being distracted, guess what Aiko pulled out yet again? The Ocarina of Time sees less usage than this thing. With that, they passed one of the more pointless tests in my opinion, like seriously, why do a lot of these have to become races? Anyway, with that plot point done, I guess we can move on to another that's thankfully going to be the last one of this episode. The Ojamajo were called in to have an audience with the Queen, who relayed Majorine's findings about the 4 new underlings of Oyaji, who are totally not related to the 4 oddly dressed boys who they just met and seem to appear out of nowhere. Also, I know we're kind of out of COVID at this point, but y'all don't want to give yourselves a little more social distance there? Anyway, to further support their protection of Hana, Queen gave them a few more toys, tools, including another laptop designed to recapture Oyaji, thank god, and a tracking device for Hana, which, yeah, you'd think they would have tried to give to them right off the bat. Anyway, the episode just kind of ended there after the obvious product placement. Yeah, y'all want to be a little more subtle next time. While I am glad that we are back on the main Hana plot, I do have to say, this wasn't the best episode to come back on. As I said, there were just too many subplots, with most just kind of ending rather abruptly. Like, you could actually make whole episodes out of some of this, and yet they decided to just cram it all into one. It does make me wonder if this really was supposed to be more than one episode, as otherwise, this is a bit of an incoherent mess. I think a big problem with this season is how predicated the main plot is to raising Hana. Not that I dislike this plot point, far from it, it's actually one of my favorites of the season, but it also becomes apparent when they take time away from it, as after just a couple of episodes where Hana didn't even appear, the show suddenly seems like it needed to hit fast forward and stuff all of these Hana-related stories into one. I mean, I don't think we should blame the writer of this one, as it was the showrunner in Midori Kuriyama. He probably could have written at least 2 episodes out of this. One focusing on the introduction of the titular Flat 4, and the other for Aiko's harmonica and its influence on Hana. As I said, I would prefer the latter, and am disappointed we didn't dig deeper into Aiko's character, as I think she usually has some of the best stories, but I also wouldn't have minded to have a full episode dedicated to this show's Psycho Rangers. They're likable enough, especially when torturing Oyaji, and we could have had a few more fun shenanigans with them adjusting to the human world and trying to get a hand on it. However, when you try to force these 2 very different plots into one episode, they end up competing for screen time, and in the end, neither really feels like a complete story. Not helped by the fact that they had to try and throw in these new toys into the last few minutes of the episode. It really kind of says something when Mitsuru Aoyama's animation was the least of this episode's problems. I mean, to be fair, it actually wasn't that bad, in spite of having at least a few of his usual corner-cutting tactics, but frankly, for an episode like this, it didn't really matter how good the animation was, when nothing really got time to develop. Thus, overall, this was a pretty disappointing episode. It had an interesting setup with Aiko, but as soon as the boys came to town, it just didn't pan out well, and these 4 should probably go back to the back streets. Work on the Futai review is going well, so hopefully we'll have something in the oncoming weeks. In the meantime though, as always, do feel free to check out some of our other videos and weekly content. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and
We are the Ginyu Force!
Yes, very nice guys. Now could you get in your little pea ships and leave?